Every place has a story. Every road, a memory. Every mountain, a myth. Across Virginia, the land still hums with the voices of those that came before us. The native people, the settlers, the storytellers, dreamers, and wanderers. The ones who shaped its soil and its songs. This is Map and Myth, a journey through the folklore and forgotten corners of the Commonwealth, where travel meets storytelling and every road leads to a story worth remembering. I'm Matty Mackey, and this is where stories become landscapes. Every mountain has two faces, one carved by wind and time, and the other one carved by the human heart. We climb them for different reasons, to conquer, to escape, to understand, and somewhere between their roots and their peaks, we find ourselves reflected. In this Map and Myth, we're traveling into the mountain, not just the one that rises over the Blue Ridge, but the one that also rises in all of us. The Blue Ridge Mountains have been here longer than memory, before the first stories were told, before there were names for things, before there were people to speak them. They say the ridges are the oldest mountains on this side of the world, worn down from peaks that once scraped the stars. Time has humbled them, but not silenced them. They still hold the echo of something ancient. Long before the settlers came, the Monacan people lived in these hills. They told stories of the high places, sacred ground where earth and sky touched hands. The mountain was not a thing to climb, it was a thing to honor. A place where the spirits dwelled, where ancestors waited between the trees. They left offerings of cornmeal and tobacco at the base of springs, believing that every stream began with a story. Later came the settlers, farmers, wanderers, and the weary and hopeful. To them, the mountain was something else, a test, a wall. They built cabins in its shadow and prayed the storms would pass above them. But they, too, began to whisper stories. One story tells of the Devil's Staircase, a path that vanishes halfway up near the ridge at Wintergreen. Those who climb it at twilight say the stone steps grow steeper with every breath until they rise into the clouds. If you keep going, you might never find your way down again. The mountain, they say, takes those who climb too high with pride. Then there's the story of the witches' lights, blue globes that flicker between the trees on moonless nights. Some say they're the trapped spirits of the unburied dead, or the lanterns of travelers lost long ago. Others say they're made by those who lived alone amongst the mountain, lighting the forest to keep away the things that hunted them at night. Either the way, the mountain is full of eyes. A century ago, travelers passing through these valleys spoke of hearing a single fiddle tune echoing from nowhere, a waltz that drifted between the hollows but never grew any closer. They said it was played by the ghosts of the first settlers, still calling to each other through the fog. But maybe these stories aren't about ghosts at all. Maybe they're about memory. Because what we call haunting is often just remembering, the land remembering us. Every culture that's touched these mountains has seen something of itself reflected in them. For some, they were sacred. For others, cursed. For most, mysterious. The Cherokee believed that the mist rising from the valleys each morning was the breath of the Great Spirit watching over the living. To the Scots-Irish settlers, the same mist was the souls of the departed. Two truths held in the same fog. There's an old saying in these parts, the mountain keeps what it wants. And maybe that's true. Not just the bodies or the bones or the echoes, but the stories themselves. Every tale left behind becomes another stone in the ridge, another shadow in the holler. The mountain remembers the storytellers, too. So when you walk these trails, listen, not for the birds or the creaking branches, but for the low hum underneath it all. That is the sound of thousands of years of stories still breathing. Every ridge, every bend in the trail, every stream that catches the light, it's all the same story retold in different tongues. A story about endurance, about stillness, and about what it means to stand and weather the centuries. And maybe that's why we still come here, to walk among something older than us, to feel small, yes, but also to feel part of something that endures. Because the mountain isn't just stone and tree and sky. It's memory turned to landscape. It's story made solid. I've always thought about the mountains more as landmarks. They're teachers in their own quiet way. They don't lecture or move or demand. They just stand there. And somehow that's enough. When I was writing my song, The Mountain, I wasn't really thinking about geography. I was thinking about struggle, about the climb that happens inside of us. Every person has a mountain. Sometimes it's a dream. Sometimes it's a memory that you can't set down. Sometimes it's a thing you're afraid to face, but you can't walk away from. I remember hiking the Blue Ridge one fall here recently. The fog rolled in so thick I couldn't see more than maybe a few feet ahead of me, and the trees turned into ghosts, and the air was wet and metallic. And for a while, I wasn't even sure if I was on the trail anymore. But in that moment, sort of lost in the fog, everything felt strangely right. Because isn't that what every climb feels like? You move forward, one uncertain step at a time, trusting that the path is there even when you can't see the summit. There's a line in the song that I played around with that came from that day. The mountain never moved, but I did. And I realized that was the point. The mountain doesn't have to change. We do. That's sort of the quiet trick of endurance, not to conquer, but to be changed by what we endure. The old stories talked about witches and ghosts and devils inside the hills. I think what they were really naming was transformation. Every myth is just a metaphor for change. The devil's staircase, the witch's light, those weren't warnings necessarily about danger. They were reminders that transformation is costly. You have to remember that to climb, something in you has to die a little bit, and something new has to be reborn. When I first started writing The Mountain, and not just The Mountain, but also some of these other anthologies that are associated with this greater idea, it started as sort of a small thing, like a melody I just couldn't shake. But as I wrote, it grew heavier. It became about every creative climb, about the weight of chasing a dream and sometimes the solitude that comes with that process, about how you keep walking even when no one is watching. Sometimes when you're alone in the mountains, you start to understand why the old storytellers filled them with ghosts. The quiet starts to talk back, and in that silence you hear everything you've been running from. I think that's what creation feels like. The moment before something exists. It's quiet, it's a little terrifying, and it's strangely holy. The climb isn't about reaching a peak, it's about being willing to start. To face the unknown and keep going even when the fog doesn't lift. So when you hear this song or listen to these stories, think about the mountain not as an obstacle, but an invitation. Every note is a step, every breath is a ridge, every pause, a place to rest. The mountain is myth, and we just keep walking. I still think about that hike sometimes. The fog, the silence, the small miracle of still being there when it cleared. And every time I sing this song or write, I remember that the climb never really ends. The mountain is always there, inside and out. So if you ever feel like finding your own mountain, the kind that hums beneath the surface of your life, you don't have to go far. Just drive west until the trees begin to gather and the sky leans close enough to touch. The Blue Ridge has always been more than a place. It's a mood, it's a pulse, a stretch of time slowed down to the pace of wind and stone. From the edge of Virginia Beach, it's about 5 hours to the ridgeline. Long enough, just long enough, to let the noise drain away, and short enough to feel like an invitation. There are so many places to see in the Blue Ridge, so for the first episode, I'm just going to focus on a small region. Begin on Skyline Drive, the crown of the Shenandoah. Roll your windows down, smell the pine, the earth still damp from last night's rain. Every curve opens to another vista, the kind that makes you breathe deeper without realizing it. Park at Rangeview Overlook or Stony Man Trail and just listen. The silence here isn't empty, it's full. Full of wind, full of memory, and the soft murmur of everything you thought you left behind. Drive south from Front Royal. Eventually, you'll reach Humpback Rocks Trail. It's short, just less than a mile up, but it climbs fast, like the mountain is testing your resolve. Along the way, you'll see the old pioneer cabins tucked into the slope, built by hands that carved a living from the land. At the top, you'll find nothing but wind, sky, and your own heartbeat. Bring water, bring time, and leave whatever you're carrying that doesn't belong to you. After your climb, head east towards Sperryville, where the mountains settle into rolling hills and soft pasture. There's a place there called Hopkins Ordinary Ale Works. Part inn, part brewery, part storytelling hub. Order something dark and malty. That's my recommendation, at least. Sit outside if the weather allows. Locals might tell you stories, not the kind in books, but the kind that live between sips. Every mountain town has at least one storyteller, and they know all the same truth. The ghosts here aren't unfriendly. They just don't want to be forgotten. If you need a soft landing, Luray or Front Royal are perfect for a slow evening. Walk their main streets lined with antique shops and faded signs. Step into Gathering Grounds Cafe for a cup of coffee or a slice of pie, the kind that still tastes like home. As dusk falls, the mountains around town turn from blue to violet to black. That's when the day exhales, and you realize the mountain's lesson was never about climbing. It was about stillness. Should you decide to stay the night, I recommend finding a small cabin or B&B tucked into the ridge. Wake up before the sun and step outside with your coffee. You'll hear what I mean when I say the mountain breathes. There's a low sound, almost like the world stretching after a long sleep. It's easy to miss if you're not listening for it, but it's always there. These places aren't destinations so much as doorways, places to remember that you're a part of something older, steadier, and endlessly patient. The mountain won't move for you, but if you listen, it might change the way you move through the world. Thank you for listening to Map and Myth. I'm Matty Mackey, and this was The Mountain as Myth, our first episode. If you enjoyed the story, follow along for more Virginia folklore, hidden histories, and weekend escapes. Until next time, may your road be winding, your compass be true, and your story your own.